minimal, with minimal or no instigation, there would be a 0 to 60. So I developed and co-wrote a program with Chris Presser called Delaware Wonder. It was a pilot under the Obama administration. And one of the things that we started looking at was what were the barriers to self-sufficiency? And that's when we really started getting into what trauma-informed approach was and how ACEs was affecting a lot of our population that we served in their interactions with the workers, as well as the inability to potentially move forward, become self-sufficient, and hold down certain positions. So it's been a real eye-opener. It was nice to feel validated from when I was younger, saying something's just not quite right, I don't understand, to finally going to partnering with Wilmington University and going through the training, the trauma-informed approach, and really understanding what it was that I was already kind of feeling.
Okay, thank you, ladies. First question. Tell me about what policies you have implemented to support trauma-informed care, and you can take it from what spin, if it's for staff or for your clients. Michelle, how about that? How about letting us know about that?
Sure. One of the things that I've done on the educational side is to make sure that our staff all has a strong understanding of relationships, of ACEs, and of something called the developmental assets. And if that's not something familiar to you, I strongly recommend that you look that up. Developmental assets, you can get a wealth of information from the Search Institute. When I first heard about the developmental assets, I thought, this is it. This is the list of what everyone should be given when you leave the hospital with a newborn baby. This is the how to do it right. And so we do a lot of work in the academy and in other places that I've worked before around informing and ensuring that we are following and teaching the developmental assets. We actually have a process of having students as leaders and listening to our children, because sometimes we see behavior when our children don't feel like they're being heard. I know as a parent, I heard many times as the boys were growing up that we weren't listening to them. I think most parents hear those words. So, and when you feel like you're not being heard, that's when the frustration comes in. So looking at just involving others in the conversations. And then another thing that we have made into a policy and really hardcore practice is the way we view things. So looking at things through a trauma-informed lens. It is so common to have somebody say what's wrong with them. And instead of saying what's wrong with, we asked what happened to. Because the difference in the way you approach it, when you change it from what's wrong with to what happened to, your compassion level goes up. Your ability to sympathize and empathize and truly try to understand changes. And we do that with our adults as well as with our students. We have, sometimes we have parents that have the need for a softer touch and a trauma-informed approach. So it's not just for our students, but what we also have made into a solid practice here is the village outlook. It takes all of us coming together. It takes all of us knowing that everyone's coming from a different perspective and a different place, and we're going to come together and we're going to make each other better as a result. But ultimately, it's the foundation is on relationships. It's building the healthy, positive relationships. And as you look at trauma-informed practices, the key, most important thing to remember is the power of a relationship. A positive, healthy relationship can negate all of the problems that come with having ACEs and having a lack of anything or having a lot of trauma in the past. It just comes down to the power of that positive relationship and that caring and compassionate person. And then the last thing that we've really implemented on a regular basis is doing book studies. So let's just be continuously learning. There's so much to know. The entire Academy team is reading a book called Help for Billy, which is a phenomenal way to understand the trauma-informed approach. And it gives tools in the toolbox. And while it's written for educators, as state employees, we're all educating others. So it's not necessary. You could read this book and Billy could become that troubled employee that you have, or the client that comes in that's difficult to deal with. It's something that really, it gives you tools in your toolbox. And that's all we're trying to do, is just build as many tools in the toolbox as we possibly can, to have people feel like they're heard and that their needs are being met as well as ours.
Thank you, Michelle. Tanya, what can you add?
So we've done several things. In 2017, 3 directors created a tri-divisional trauma-informed approach initiative with the Division of Social Services, Division of State Service Centers, and the Division of Child Support Services. We collaborated with Wilmington University to create a trauma-informed mandatory training for all employees for all 3 of the divisions. By 2018, after we had gone through the courses, there were 24 of us from all 3 divisions that became trauma-informed approach trainers. And we cross-trained amongst the 3 divisions to train over 1,200 staff in phase 1. In 2018, we did that. Then the executive order later that year came out. So we preceded the order. Once we looked at the order and we looked at the different levels, we formed a tri-divisional work group, which I am co-chair of, and we are tasked to do phase 2, which was to raise our from awareness to move towards to be in a full formal trauma-informed approach divisions, all 3 of us. Phase 2, because of COVID, got pushed back for a while, but the curriculum has been done, reviewed by Wilmington University, and as soon as we can, we'll pull the trigger on phase 2. The work group is also required to ensure that in the interim, we do things to keep it in the forefront of our staff's minds. We do things like there's a mandatory, phase 2, training is mandatory as well. We have mandatory bulletin boards that we change every quarter to keep it in forefront of our staff's mind. We do emails, newsletters, things for self-care. We do all of those things that are mandatory. We even during COVID had group sessions during COVID with the employee assistance program that all of the divisions could come together and talk about things that were happening and help each other and be supportive. In our service delivery during COVID, of course, we did flexible work schedules so it could work around remote learning for the parents. We limited access to the buildings for clients, but we expanded our telephone lines. We did applications online, telephone interviews, things like that, so that the staff was safe, our clients were safe, and the clients still had access to all of our benefits. We hired service cleaners to clean all of our offices, things like that. We implemented something called Lunchbox and Jukebox. It's an afternoon 1-hour sessions a couple of times a month in which we either do crafts or talk about self-care. And then Jukebox is a session that I kind of DJ, where we just do music and relax and do things like that. And then we implemented through our staff development program in 2019, a customer service program that's mandatory. We did things that it's a 4-day module. It has components of self-care and self-promotion and all of those types of things. It's expanded now to be called Servicing Those Who Serve Others. And this new branch of training will offer an array of new workshops focusing on wellness, staff development, professional development, management, self-care, leadership and empowerment. These are all the things that we are doing towards a holistic self-care for our staff. As we continue to with our clients, we've expanded our benefits. We've increased the benefit amounts over COVID. We also restricted some of the requirements so that folks can feel safe.
That's great, Tanya. Let's go on to the next question. Talk to us about the tools and/or resources you use to incorporate how do you incorporate trauma awareness to your staffs? Go ahead, we'll start with Michelle.
So lots of reading, lots of researching, lots of sharing of information. There's so many great ideas, and it doesn't need to, you don't have to have any degree behind your name to know some things that work. So it's not about that piece of education. I think you can get there without the formal education, but just reaching out to others and finding out what works. Reading things like there's a book that I have read that is also a free resource. It's called Compassionate Schools, The Heart of Teaching and Learning. It's through the state of Washington. They actually started doing the trauma-informed work, and we replicated a lot of their work here in Delaware. And again, while it's targeted towards schools, it works for all places. There's self-care strategies. There's all kinds of great information in the Compassionate Schools, the Heart of Teaching and Learning. Increasing awareness has also been a really big thing. A lot of educators haven't had the background and the experience to understand trauma-informed approaches. When we interview somebody, when I ask you what is your preference on teaching, I want you to say children. I don't want you to say English or math, because we teach kids. Another thing that is really important is to understand the difference. Oftentimes when you see a child that has had a lot of trauma, they look like the child that has the worst case of ADHD you've ever seen. They cannot sit still. They cannot hold it together. They just physically, they do not have that ability. And it's really because their brain has changed. And it has nothing to do with them having ADHD. Oftentimes kids get misdiagnosed as having ADHD when they have a high incidence of trauma in their background. So we make sure that our staff understands that. So if you see that child that just cannot sit still and is all over the place and really struggling to toe the line, we make sure they understand that's a likely sign of a lot of trauma, not ADHD, and medicating them with ADHD meds is only going to do the opposite effect of what you're looking to have happen. Instead, building the rapport, the relationship, reaching out to them, engaging them in something, finding out what their interests are, that's the way to get the child to turn it around. And I have firsthand seen the success of that happening. We actually have one student here that had a really rough history of his education. He's a 6th grader. He came here for his first year this year. And his statement to me the other day was that he's a changed person because he is at the academy and we deal with things differently here. Which to me is one of the best testimonials there can be, like just to have a student recognize that his statement was, I don't need to get in fights every day because I'm a leader now and I understand what to do. So seeing the kids really turn their lives around, that is a reinforcer. Our staff saw the change happen and then they're like, wait, what is it? How are we doing that? They try to emulate it. And so we've built an entire team that this is what we're about with each other as well. So if you see somebody not having a good day or whatever, it really just comes down to the relationships and the understanding and networking. One of the things that I created years back was Compassionate Schools Facebook group. So, and anyone is welcome to join that. And it's a way that we can throw questions out there, throw suggestions out there. And it's really been networking, which again comes back to relationships, but it's just been that sharing of information and then continuously reading more and what's out there and watching and seeing the effects. Because when you see the change happen, it changes me to see the change that we were able to make for our children and our parents. I mean, we've turned a lot of our parents around too, because once they realize that we're just about helping, it's the village here. We just do it right. And we don't throw kids away. We keep kids and we make them better people. And we make ourselves better in the process. So that has been really powerful. But networking in general, I mean, the fact that there's this many people interested in it across the state of Delaware is exciting, and continuing the conversations.
Thank you, Michelle. Jerry, let's get you in here. What type of resources and tools do you use?
Well, when I'm providing some professional development for our adult educators, and we are all over the state. So I always start with talking about ACEs so that people have an understanding what adverse childhood experiences are. And there's a great interactive graphic that CDC has developed that shows the dose response. In other words, the more ACEs a person has in their background, the more health issues they tend to suffer as adults. And really stress that while we're talking about ACEs, childhood experiences, they do carry over into adulthood, and we talk about that study. So I always start with that. And then right after that, I let our teachers know that the next thing they need to truly understand is that self-care is a high priority in trauma-informed care. That if our teachers and our staffs are not caring for themselves, that they're not going to be able to do what they need for their students. And sometimes that's hard for all of us. And we chatted a little bit about that even before the session began today, that, you know, sometimes it's hard to put that self-care forward first, but we need to be able to do that. And to be watching out for each other, not only our students, but also for each other. I talk a lot about resilience. There's a great TED Talk where Charles Hunt talks about how what trauma taught him about resilience. And it's a great video of a young man who encountered lots of trauma in his life, but yet now has become a motivational speaker. So we talk about how you develop resilience and how we can help our students develop resilience. You know, Michelle really talked about relationships, and that's important too. You know, and for those of teachers that I work with that work in correctional facilities, it's just a little different working in that environment. But one of the things that we can truly do is each day when our students enter our classroom is look at them in the eye and greet them by name. Just to get that eye contact and give them the respect and let them know that I care enough about you that I want to know you and to help you move forward. As COVID hit, we did not have any face-to-face professional development, of course, as everyone. So we have developed in Schoology, and I'm just kind of looking to the side, we have a folder in Schoology that has many resources for both our educators and that they can also pass along to their students who are also parents. And that carries over, of course, into the K-12 system. CASTLE, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, is a wonderful resource. NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, is a great resource. PBS has published a lot of videos and PD for trauma-informed care, and those are just a couple. So now we have a repository, so where these resources are available for teachers at any time that they need to go back and access them. And always ending every training with, again, as Michelle said, that we're asking what has happened in this person's life as opposed to what's wrong with them.
Thank you so much, Jerry. Tanya?
Well, CSS in our service delivery, we formed a leadership committee that represented all areas, both frontline service and behind the scenes service from our division, to ensure that we had a comprehensive plan during COVID to protect both clients and staff. What we started doing was we created logs and we used other mechanisms to track not only the quantity of our service, but the quality of our service, to see if we were having more negative interactions so that we can reinforce the trauma-informed approach, because we have a newsletter through our work group that's called From What's Wrong With You to What Happened to You, is the actual title of our newsletter that goes out. So it's foremost and in the forefront of all the things that we talk about. With our expansion in our customer service for serving those who serve others, we did a couple of things. We went through the training evaluations to ask how we could train better what are we missing? Because we have internal and external customers, which is our clients and our staff as well. We requested training surveys to ask for, with trauma-informed approach or any other approaches or any other trainings that we had, what would you like to see? We do thank you cards and self-care gifts through our trainings as well. We do bi-weekly and quarterly newsletters to get this information out about trauma-informed approach. We partnered with EAP, even outside of the trauma-informed work group. Our staff development customer service is now offering, as part of curriculums, the different things that our employee assistance program is actually providing to us to give them a better opportunity, because not everyone goes in and looks at EAP and see what they have to offer. So we're actually advertising now what they have to offer. And we also now have a self-care treat. It takes up an entire wall here at our staff development offices, and the individual leaves, and staff can tell us what it is, or they can come in and write on the leaf what they do for self-care so that the tree blossoms and continues. And with our trauma-informed approach trauma awareness month this month, with our trauma-informed approach work group, we did several things. We do love mass emails. They go out to every employee at all three of our divisions. And we do subject focuses on things like our newsletter was the difference between vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue and burnout, so that they know there is the differences. We also did an entire article on resilience and self-care, and also the history of how trauma-informed approach with Order 24 came about, so that it stays in the forefront of their mind. We also did Monday, Wednesdays, and Friday affirmations. We just simply sent out wonderful affirmations to all of our staff. They loved it, so we are going to continue it after Trauma Awareness Month. As we also did a self-care challenge that we might continue to have. So we're doing all kinds of initiatives and things like that that help to keep it in the forefront, even when we're not doing formalized training.
Okay, wow, thank you, Tanya. I'm going to be calling you.
Okay, great. We love it. We love to share. Give me a call.
Well, we are down to about, looking at my clock, I think we have about 6 minutes or so. So this is going to be the final question, and keep that in mind to be brief so we can get everybody in. What would you like to see happen in the future with respect to trauma-informed care? I mean, Tanya, you just mentioned things that you're going to continue to do beyond Trauma Awareness Month. Talk about some activities, and I'm even going to say beyond COVID, because I'm sure you all have mentioned things that you've done as a result of COVID. So talk about some things you want to see carry forward in the future. Michelle, go ahead.
I would love to see more summits like this happen. Just more conversations where people can share, because we have a wealth of knowledge amongst us, and just the different ideas that come out of the conversations that we can have. I also would love to see it become a part of an orientation process and part of an educator training program, that everyone comes in understanding what ACEs are and understanding all of the effects of trauma, and just having the resources in a central place or a repository, because there's so much out there, and there's so many resources that exist. It's just where to go to find them all. So having a central place for them would be wonderful.
Okay, Jerry, what about you?
Well, in my work group, we are there's a continuum for trauma-informed care. So I think for where I am, we are what's called trauma sensitive, where we're beginning to apply everything, and we understand about self-care, but we need to keep moving forward and pushing out information as new teachers come in, as we move beyond COVID and we can get together more. I love some of the ideas Tanya was talking about, so that we can move more into trauma responsive and then truly trauma informed care, where it's embedded in all of our programs, and it's almost become second nature. So that's my goal, and that's what I'd like to see for us.
That truly is a great idea, and I would love to see the second nature, as you know, that's got to be where it's seamless. Like, it's just how we are. It's just what we do. It's not, you know, something that's being browbeated into you. It's just very easily done. Tanya, what can you add?
So in the short term, we want to get our phase 2 of our training implemented and out. I think we too, as Jerry was talking about, that developmental framework, we want to get to truly a trauma-informed approach. So that's long-term with not only our interviewing processes, our accesses, our forms, how everything is written, and how we teach and train our staff to interact is some big, big lofty goals that we have that we actually believe we can do. I'm one of the members on our department steering committee with Roseanne. And we work, we share across the department what each agency is doing so that we can kind of help each other as we move the department forward so that we can move the state forward.
Okay, we have a couple of minutes. I wanted to know, I think we have some comments on the chat. You know, I'm hearing from whoever YF Lou is, that just some comments. Great to hear about the progression, and it's important to get the organizational buy-in, and that is a major challenge. So
Yeah.
that is it, that is part of it, and we have a great work. So oh, okay, so she or he can't, you know, can't say anything out loud because they're in their office. And thank you for the chat, though. Yeah, how about real quickly, anyone want to tackle? I think we have about a minute or two left. About how can we, you know, the buy-in, like any comments on that, how you've accomplished it, how, you know, with your organization, which I know too are definitely state employees, what more can we do? Jerry, well, let's start with you. What could we do to just, again, get to that seamless area?
So I think it's putting out that information. And putting it out again and putting it out again, and not being pushy, because obviously it's trauma-informed care. But you know, I did a workshop at a different agency at one point, and someone actually said, well, because they were speaking about kids, it was a K-12 world, and they said, well, why can't they just suck it up? And that was after presentations and after quite a discussion. So I thought, well, that person doesn't quite get it yet. So that person just needs more information and understanding as to why they can't just suck it up. And in my, you know, like I said, I'm adult education now. So when kids are not getting the support in the K-12 world, and Tanya, you see this with the adults that you work with, where it's carrying over into the adult world. So I think it's our responsibility that we just need to keep pushing it out there and providing information and following up and making sure that our staff members are practicing self-care, because that's just so important too.
Well,
Staff buy-in, absolute staff buy-in.
Yeah.
You can get more champions. We call ours TX, trauma-informed approach champions. The more champions you have, it will push administration to get it done.
Yes.
well, thank you. Michelle, you have anything? We got 38 seconds. What do you have for us?
I was just going to say, I started with the buy-in at the top. So here it was easy because I am that person. So we just said, this is what we're doing. But I've implemented it in other school districts. And it's always been a conversation at the top to say, here's the why. And once they get it, then we go to everyone else and involve the others so that they can all understand the why.